Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine, a presence in the room when you know you should be alone? The feeling of being watched by something unseen, something lurking just beyond the edge of your vision? Tonight, we delve into the unsettling world of shadow people. These aren't the shadows cast by streetlights or moonlight. No, these are entities of pure darkness, often glimpsed in the periphery, gone before you can truly focus on them. They are the whispers in the dead of night, the cold spots in a warm room, the unexplainable feeling that you are not alone. Join me if you dare as we explore 3 terrifying encounters with these creatures of darkness in the Shadow People. Creatures that stalk in the night. Our first story takes us to a small, quiet town, much like any other. Sarah, a young woman just starting out on her own, had found the perfect apartment. It was cozy, affordable, and had a charming view of the park across the street. The first few weeks were uneventful, filled with the excitement of decorating and making the space her own. But as the days turned into weeks, a creeping sense of unease began to settle over Sarah. It started subtly, a feeling of being watched while she cooked dinner, a flicker of movement out of the corner of her eye. She brushed it off at first, attributing it to stress or an overactive imagination, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, as Sarah settled in to read a book, she noticed it. In the corner of the room, just beyond the pool of light cast by her lamp, a shadow seemed to be coalescing. It wasn't the sharp, defined shadow of furniture, but a darker, more amorphous shape. It flickered and swayed as if struggling to maintain its form. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped Sarah's heart. She told herself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, a primal instinct screamed at her to run. Night after night, the shadow returned, always lurking in the periphery of her vision. It never seemed to move, never made a sound, yet its presence filled Sarah with an overwhelming sense of dread. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by a constant state of hypervigilance. Desperate for answers, Sarah confided in a friend, an elderly woman known for her knowledge of local folklore. The woman listened intently, her face etched with concern. "Shadow people," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They say they feed off fear, off the energy of the living." Armed with this knowledge, Sarah tried to ignore the shadow, to pretend it wasn't there. But the fear was a living thing, twisting in her gut, whispering doubts in her ear. The shadow seemed to grow stronger, bolder, emboldened by her terror. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Sarah packed her belongings and fled the apartment. She never returned, leaving behind the cozy life she had built, haunted by the memory of the shadow in the corner. Our next story takes us to the quiet suburbs, where a young boy named Ethan experienced something terrifying. Ethan, a child full of life and imagination, had always been fascinated by the shadows that danced on his bedroom wall at night. He would often invent stories about them, turning them into friendly giants and playful animals. But one night, the shadows took on a more sinister form. Ethan awoke suddenly, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the moon through his window. He felt a presence in the room, a weight pressing down on him, stealing his breath. He turned his head slowly, his eyes struggling to adjust to the darkness. And that's when he saw it. Standing at the foot of his bed, a tall, shadowy figure loomed over him. It had no discernible features, just a void where its face should have been. Ethan lay frozen in terror, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. He wanted to scream for his parents, but fear choked the words in his throat. The figure remained motionless, its presence radiating an aura of malice that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. Time seemed to stand still as Ethan stared at the shadowy apparition. He couldn't look away, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. It felt like an eternity before the figure finally began to move. It glided silently across the room, its movements fluid and unnatural. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, burying his face in his pillow, willing himself to wake up from the nightmare. But the feeling of dread persisted, pressing down on him like a physical weight. He lay there for what felt like hours, too terrified to open his eyes, too afraid to move. Finally, as the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, Ethan dared to look again. The figure was gone. He scrambled out of bed and ran to his parents' room, his heart still pounding in his chest. He told them everything, his voice trembling with fear. His parents, though concerned, dismissed it as a bad dream, but Ethan knew what he had seen. He knew that the figure by the bed was real, and the memory of that night continued to haunt him for years to come. Chapter 3. The Stalker in the Hallway. Our final story takes us to a sprawling old mansion with a dark history. Emily, a young photographer drawn to the mansion's eerie beauty, decided to spend a night there alone, hoping to capture its haunting essence in her photographs. As dusk settled and shadows stretched across the mansion's dusty floors, Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creaking of floorboards beneath her feet. She wandered from room to room, her camera clicking, documenting the decay and grandeur of a bygone era. As she made her way down a long, dimly lit hallway, she noticed something strange in the viewfinder of her camera. At the far end of the hallway, a dark figure seemed to be standing, partially obscured by the shadows. She lowered the camera, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure was gone. She told herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, the result of being alone in the old house. But as she continued her exploration, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of her eye, a fleeting shadow darting across the wall, a flicker of darkness at the edge of her vision. The feeling of unease grew stronger, wrapping around her like a cold, damp fog. Later that night, as Emily reviewed the photos she had taken, she felt a chill run down her spine. In several of the photos, lurking in the background, was the same shadowy figure she had seen in the hallway. It was always partially obscured, always just out of focus, as if it existed just beyond the reach of the camera's lens. Panic welled up inside her. She had come to the mansion seeking inspiration, but she had found something far more sinister. She packed her belongings, her hands trembling, her every instinct screaming at her to get out of the house. As she made her way to her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. She could hear the sound of her own footsteps echoing in the stillness. But there was another sound too, a soft shuffling sound, as if something was dragging itself along the ground behind her. She didn't dare turn around. She ran to her car, fumbled with the keys, and sped away from the mansion. The image of the shadowy figure burned into her mind. She never returned to the mansion, forever haunted by the memory of the stalker in the hallway. 3 stories, 3 chilling encounters with entities that defy explanation. Are shadow people merely figments of our imagination, tricks of the light, or something more sinister? Are they interdimensional beings, malevolent entities, or remnants of souls past? The truth, as with most things that go bump in the night, remains shrouded in mystery. But one thing is certain, these encounters leave an indelible mark on those unfortunate enough to experience them. What do you think lurks in the shadows? Have you had your own encounter with the unexplained? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And keep looking over your shoulder, because you never know what might be watching from the darkness.